Okay, thanks, comrades. Thanks, Dave, and thanks, comrades, and thanks for the invite tonight. I'm glad Graham spoke before me because I agree with 95% of what Graham said, and he saved me the trouble of saying some of the things that he actually said himself. I've actually got a constituency Labour Party meeting tomorrow night, and my constituency Labour Party is Brentwood and Ongar. It's not a particularly solid left Labour Party by any means. I would describe it more as middle of the road. There are right wingers, middle of the road members, and left wingers. But on the kind of WhatsApp group that I haven't found one single comment or note in support of in support of Starmer in the last few weeks, and that's very significant. We've got two resolutions to the constituency meeting tomorrow. One is a resolution of no confidence in Keir Starmer, and the other one is an emergency resolution on Gaza. We can't ignore either issue really, but it's interesting that we've got those two resolutions because there actually is a connection between them. Graham mentioned the campaign on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party over the last 5 years, 6 years really. And although the main purpose of that campaign to blow up and exaggerate and to kind of make a huge mountain out of allegations of anti-Semitism, the main purpose of that was to undermine the left and to undermine Jeremy Corbyn personally. An important secondary aim was to try to stifle and intimidate people from criticising the state of Israel. And that was an important feature. So where are we with the Labour Party at the present time? Now, I think we have to kind of look at a broad canvas, look back a little bit to see where we are socially and politically. I can remember at the first rally we had in Chelmsford in Essex for Jeremy in 2015. And one of the speakers said from the rostrum that this is the first generation for about 4 generations where younger people have got lower expectations than their parents and their grandparents. I know that applies to me. I know that my children who are growing up and just getting work and just thinking about getting a house and starting a family, they're in a far worse position than I was. And my position was better than my parents, and my parents' position was better than their parents. So why all of a sudden has the pendulum swung in the opposite direction? Why is it that by any measure of quality of life, of housing, of pay, of work stability, of education, of health, by whatever yardstick you want to choose, why is it that the younger generation are facing a worse situation than we faced, or even our grandparents? Now, that was the case in 2015. And I remember my union, I remember the NEU, or the NUT as it was then, we produced information at the time of the 2015 general election to show that school teachers were about 15% worse off in terms of the take-home pay than they had been in 2010. And if that applies to teachers, I'm sure it applies right across the board, all public sector workers and workers in general. And by any measure, workers have been in a position for the last 10 years where they're having to defend bitterly, they're having to defend strenuously all of the gains that they built up as a class, that the working class built up, the democratic rights, the living standards, defending vigorously these things that were there previously. Now, I think you can't, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has cut across that, but it won't remove that. In fact, once the pandemic is out of the way, then all of those economic and social forces will begin to reassert themselves. Now, I think it's important to make those points because that was the background and that was the, if you like, the backdrop to the election of Jeremy Corbyn in 2015. If you ask the question, why is the ruling class one of the most powerful ruling classes on the planet with 150 years of history? Why is this ruling class afraid of some genial old fella who grows his own rhubarb and makes his own yogurt? You know, some genial old bloke who looks, you know, might look like your granddad. Why was he striking terror in the boardrooms and the editorial rooms of the Daily Mail and the Express? It wasn't for who Jeremy Corbyn was. It was for what he represented. At our rally in Chelmsford, I remember Jeremy Corbyn talking about the press. And he pointed, by the way, this was in the Chelmsford Civic Theatre. It was a packed meeting, the biggest political meeting in Essex for 50 years. And I remember Jeremy Corbyn pointing to the audience and actually saying, it's not me they're afraid of, it's you. It's you they're afraid of. Now, it's important to make that point because Corbynism did represent something. It represented the beginning of a change of consciousness because workers were realizing that they were having to run hard to stand still, they were having to fight to stand still, and it was the beginning of a change of consciousness. And that's what it represented. It represented something. Corbynism didn't necessarily need Corbyn. It could have reflected itself in some other way, through some other channel, by some other means. As it happens, it came through Jeremy Corbyn's accidental nomination on the ballot paper for the leadership of the Labour Party. So it's important to see that, because whatever Keir Starmer tries to do, and whatever David Evans tries to do, they cannot remove the fundamental direction and trajectory of society in terms of its social and economic developments. They cannot remove that. Now, whatever Boris Johnson says about levelling up, and whatever the Tories say about now being the party of the working class, we know that's bunkum. We know that. And we know that a few months down the line, workers are going to have to pay for the enormous sums of money that have been spent during the pandemic. And I don't need to tell this audience that billions and billions of pounds has been obtained corruptly through sleaze, through contacts, through WhatsApp messages to Matt Hancock, through text messages from former ministers to top civil servants and their friends. I don't need to tell you all this, but it's workers who will have to pay for that over the coming months and over the coming years. So that basic social and economic trajectory, which we had before the pandemic, will reassert itself in the course of the next few years. Now, what will that mean to the Labour Party? This is the point. What will that mean? Well, what it will mean is, particularly from the trades union side, it will mean enormous pressure from the class in exactly the same way as it was reflected in Corbynism. It will mean an enormous increase in pressure. Even right-wing unions like the JMB are fighting through things like the gas engineers strike. We've seen Unite and other workers fighting against hire and fire. And by the way, I'm not going to go into it because I haven't got too much time. But fire and rehire will become the watchword of many, many employers. And don't be surprised if it also finds its way creeping into the public sector as well, with teachers, local government workers and others as well. What will be the response of the unions in this situation? What will be the response of the members? Well, I'll eat my hat if there isn't a reaction, not only from the members, not only through the representatives, the shop stewards, the district and the regional committees, but also through the leaderships of the trade union movement. I'm not one particularly to praise that, you know, the tops of the trade union movement for who they are and what they and how they do things, but they will respond inevitably to the pressure of the workers, and that will reflect itself inside the Labour Party as well. And the point I'm making is that Keir Starmer is not the Labour Party. And the Labour Party is not Keir Starmer. What he's got to offer is absolutely nothing. What has he got to say about fire and hire? Nothing. What has he got to say about public sector key workers who are demanding 11%? The RCN, I think, are putting forward a pay claim of 10 or 11%. I forget the exact figure. What has he got to say about that? Nothing. What has he got to say about the gas workers on strike, the bus workers defending their living standards? Nothing. And that's the thing about the right wing of the Labour Party. They've got an apparatus. They've got, if you like, the lords and ladies. They've got the Peter Mandelsons. They've got the Luke Ackenhursts. But what have they got to offer in terms of policy? And the answer is nothing. And that's why I'm actually confident, and I believe that in the coming months and in the coming years, it's not we on the left who'll be isolated, but it's more and more, it'll be Starmer who's isolated on the right of the Labour Party. And I think that's the way things will develop. Even now, if you took an opinion poll amongst party members about who should be the leader, I'll bet you Andy Burnham comes far ahead of Keir Starmer. Now, Andy Burnham is not squeaky clean. He was a Minister of Health that privatised some sections of the health service. But nevertheless, through particularly over the COVID epidemic, through the question of financial support for workers in his metropolitan area in Manchester, he reflected the interest of workers to a certain degree. And because he's talking in terms of class, because he's saying things in this way, I would suggest he's more popular than Starmer is at the present time. I think the whole question of Corbynism is that we've got to see it not as an isolated once in a lifetime opportunity. I saw somebody writing that actually on Facebook during the Corbyn era. Somebody saying this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for the left Labour government. It's not a once in a lifetime opportunity. What happened in terms of Corbynism will happen again, not necessarily with the same person, and not necessarily in the same form, and not necessarily with the same features, but it will happen again because it expresses the social, economic imperative that exists within society, that pressure to find a way to reflect the interests of workers. And the question for us, I think, inside the Labour Party is to organise and to fight and prepare for that happening, because it will happen. Now, how will the left develop? I don't know. I'm not going to, if anybody asks me that question, I'll say I don't know. I don't know how the left will develop. But I will say this, the only justification for staying in the party now is to organise, to prepare, and to build the left. I agree with the suggestion that, if I heard Graham right, I agree with the suggestion he made of something like a conference of the left to help to organise the left in the same way that has happened in some trade unions, where the left is organised on a broad left basis. I agree with something like that, but on condition that it has to be a genuine conference, open to all on the left, not just a handful of people behind closed doors, excluding important parts of the left. It has to be democratic. The last time I went to a big rally, which was organised by the People's Assembly a long time ago, a couple of years ago, there were about 15 speakers on the platform, nobody speaking from the floor. That's not what I would call a conference. A genuine mass conference of the left would be a big step forward, and I think that's something that I would definitely support. In the meantime, you know the old slogan: educate, agitate, and organise, and that's what I think the left should be doing at the present time. Thank you, David.